The twin sons of Zira rose above the shining palace towers, their light turning the crystal walls into rivers of gold and silver. The palace of the Zyran Empire was said to be the most beautiful structure in the galaxy. From afar, it looked like a mountain of glass resting on clouds, but from near its details revealed carvings of old legends, statues of great rulers, and halls so tall that even giants could walk under them. On this day, the palace was brighter than ever. Nobles from every corner of the empire had gathered to witness something strange and new. For the first time in history, a human had been invited inside. Captain Elias Grant stepped out of the silver shuttle that had carried him across the stars. His boots touched the crystal floor of the palace courtyard. His uniform was simple compared to the robes and armors of the alien nobles. He carried no crown, no weapons, no jewel to show off his power. He only carried himself with calm confidence and a quiet strength that came not from armies but from his heart. The nobles whispered among themselves. Some laughed softly, finding his small frame unimpressive compared to their tall, elegant bodies. Others narrowed their eyes, suspicious of this new species that had dared to claim a place among the great civilizations. The guards in golden armor stood in straight lines, their faces hidden behind smooth masks, their weapons glowing faintly. They did not move, but Elias could feel their eyes on him. He did not flinch. He walked forward slowly, his head held high, his steps steady. Every sound echoed in the vast courtyard, reminding him of the silence that surrounded him. He was alone here, the only human among thousands of alien eyes, but he did not feel small. He remembered why he had come. Not for himself, not even for Earth, but for the hope that humanity could be more than a forgotten corner of the stars. Inside the grand hall, the throne of Queen Serenia waited. It was carved from a single crystal stone, taller than 10 men and shining like frozen light. Around it sat the High Council, robed in colors that glowed with living energy. Above them floated banners of the Empire, shaped from living silk that moved like it had a mind of its own. The air was filled with music that was not made by instruments but by invisible energy streams, singing in harmony. At the heart of it all sat Queen Serenia. She was unlike the nobles around her. Her tall figure was wrapped in silver-white robes, and her crown was a simple band of crystal. Her eyes, large and shining with a soft blue glow, watched every movement of the hall. Her beauty was not just in her appearance but in the calm authority she carried. She did not need to raise her voice to silence the chamber. She only needed to look once, and all eyes would obey. When Elias entered the hall, the chamber grew silent. The nobles leaned forward, their curiosity rising. Queen Serenia raised her hand and the golden music paused. Captain Elias Grant of Earth. Her voice was clear, smooth, and carried across the chamber like gentle thunder. Welcome to the palace of Zira. Elias bowed respectfully. He had practiced this moment many times, but now that it was here, he felt the weight of the galaxy pressing on his shoulders. He raised his head, met her glowing eyes, and spoke. Your Majesty, I bring greetings from humanity. We are honored to stand before you. We come not with power or wealth, but with hope for friendship. The nobles murmured at his words. They had expected him to speak of trade, of alliances, of military strength. But he spoke instead of friendship. Some scoffed quietly, finding it childish. Others frowned, unsure of what it meant. Queen Serenia tilted her head slightly. Her glowing eyes did not leave his. Friendship, she repeated softly, as if testing the word. Few who stand in this hall speak of such a thing. Tell me, Captain, what makes you believe humanity is worthy of friendship with an empire that has lived for 10,000 years? Elias felt the question pierce him. He knew this was a test. Every noble here wanted to hear him falter. He took a slow breath, remembering his people, his world, and the long journey that had brought him here. Because friendship is not about years, Your Majesty, he said calmly. It is about trust. Humanity is young, but we have learned that survival alone is not enough. We need trust between people, between nations, and now between stars. We may be small, but we offer honesty, loyalty, and the will to stand beside our friends no matter the cost. The hall grew quiet again. The words were simple, but they carried a strength that was not born of age or empire. Queen Serenia studied him for a long moment. Her eyes softened slightly, though her face remained calm. From the left side of the hall, one of the nobles stood. His robe was dark red, and his eyes burned with sharp light. Lord Valen, known for his pride and sharp tongue, looked down at Elias. Fine words, human, he said with a mocking smile. But words are easy. Can your kind prove them with action? Or are you here only to charm the queen with empty promises? Several nobles laughed softly. Their voices carried across the hall like the hiss of fire. Elias turned toward Velan, but instead of anger, he gave a small, respectful nod. You are right, Lord, Elias said steadily. Words mean nothing without action. That is why I stand here alone, unarmed, without protection, among those far stronger than me.
If humanity were false, would I risk myself here?
We have no armies waiting outside your gates. Only my voice and my trust that you will listen. That is our action. The laughter stopped. Even Lord Valen's mocking smile faded slightly, though his eyes still glared. The nobles whispered again, but this time with curiosity rather than scorn. Queen Serenia leaned back in her throne. For the first time in many years, her lips curved into the faintest smile. She did not speak it aloud, but in her heart she thought, this human is different. Elias felt the weight of the hall still pressing on him, but he stood firm. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but at this moment he had not failed. For the first time in history, a human voice had echoed in the palace of Zira, and it had not been silenced. The nobles did not yet trust him. The empire did not yet respect humanity, but a seed had been planted, and in the eyes of Queen Serenia, that seed already glowed with the light of possibility. The palace of Zira was not like any place Captain Elias Grant had ever seen. Its walls seemed alive, glowing faintly as if they breathed. Long corridors stretched endlessly, decorated with living crystals that shifted color depending on the mood of the hall. Sometimes they glowed with warm gold, sometimes with cold blue, reflecting the emotions of those inside. For Elias, every step was a test. He was watched from every angle by nobles in long flowing robes, their eyes sharp and curious. They spoke in whispers, their voices like soft winds, but he knew every word was about him. Humans were new to them, too new. Many doubted whether humanity deserved to stand among ancient empires. The first council meeting began in the Hall of Convergence. The chamber was circular, with seats for every ambassador who came to present their world. The center floor was shaped like a giant star, with paths of crystal leading from each seat to the middle, where speakers would stand. Ambassadors from across the galaxy had already taken their places. Some were tall and shining, their bodies made of half light and half metal. Some looked like living water flowing in crystal spheres. Others had wings, horns, or skin that glittered like stone. They all carried themselves with pride, showing the history of their people in their dress, their weapons, or their voices. When Elias entered, silence followed him. His uniform was neat but simple compared to the glowing robes and jeweled crowns of the others. He looked small beside giants, fragile beside armored warriors, but he walked with calm steps, head high, not as if he were weak, but as if he carried something greater than jewels or armor. The council began with speeches. One ambassador rose first, his robe filled with glowing gems. He spoke proudly of his people's fleets, their unmatched ships, and the trade routes they controlled. Another spoke of ancient knowledge, of libraries older than Earth's entire history. A third spoke of armies so powerful that no enemy dared challenge them. Each ambassador tried to prove their greatness through power, age, or wealth. Applause followed their words. The nobles nodded in approval, for this was the way of the empire. Respect was earned by strength and glory. When Elias's turn came, he walked slowly to the center of the star-shaped floor. The nobles leaned forward, waiting. Some smiled, expecting him to fail. He looked around at them, then raised his voice. Humans have no ancient empire, he began. We have no fleets that stretch across the stars. We have no armies greater than yours, no treasures older than your cities. We are young compared to you, the nobles whispered, surprised at his honesty. Many thought he would try to exaggerate humanity's strength, to hide weakness behind pride, but he did not. Elias continued, his voice calm but firm. We come not to boast, but to share. We offer what strength we have, not in war, not in riches, but in loyalty, in fairness, in trust. We are not here to stand above anyone, but to stand beside them. The hall grew strangely quiet. Some nobles frowned, confused. Others scoffed openly. Lord Valen, who had mocked Elias before, laughed softly. Trust, fairness? You come to an empire built on 10,000 years of strength, and you speak of childish dreams. Do you think this will win respect? A ripple of laughter moved through the chamber. Yet Elias did not answer with anger. He simply looked at Lord Valen and nodded. Yes, Lord, Elias said simply. I know many here will laugh. But to us, trust is not weakness. It is survival. Without it, humanity would have destroyed itself long ago. Without it, we would not have reached the stars. Without it, we would not be here today. The laughter stopped. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Even those who mocked him found themselves silent for a moment, though pride kept them from admitting it. Queen Serenia, watching from her high seat, did not speak. But her glowing eyes never left Elias. She saw how he stood, alone yet unshaken, speaking truths that others feared to speak. A strange warmth filled her, though she kept her face calm. The meeting continued, but Elias's words lingered in the air. When other ambassadors spoke again, some tried to mock him further. One declared, "If humans believe in loyalty, then perhaps they will make fine servants." Another added, "Fairness is for the weak. Power alone decides the future." The nobles laughed again, but Elias only stood still, showing no anger. This puzzled them even more. In their world, insults were always answered with sharper words or shows of strength. But Elias responded with patience, and that patience unsettled them. Later, during the feast that followed, Elias was placed at a long table with the other ambassadors. Strange dishes floated on shining plates, glowing fruits, silver liquids, and meats from creatures he did not recognize. He ate carefully, tasting only what he trusted, and listened more than he spoke. The ambassadors tried to outdo one another with stories of conquest and glory. One told of a war that ended with 10,000 enemy ships destroyed. Another spoke of a trade empire that forced 3 worlds into debt. They spoke loudly, expecting Elias to feel small. Finally, one of them turned to him. "And what of you, human? What victory do you bring to this table?" Elias set down his glass, looked around the table, and answered in his quiet way. "I bring no victory. I bring my word. Humanity does not claim to be the greatest. We only wish to prove we can be the truest." The table fell silent for a moment. Then some laughed again, but their laughter was uneasy. A few, especially the younger nobles, looked at him with something close to admiration. At the far end of the hall, Queen Serenia spoke softly to her advisor. "Do you see?" she asked, her voice low but thoughtful. "He does not fight their games, yet he stands taller than them." Her advisor frowned. "He is clever but dangerous. If he wins hearts with words, he may win power. Should we not be cautious?" But the queen only smiled faintly, her glowing eyes fixed on Elias. "No. We should be watchful, not of danger, but of change." The feast ended late, and Elias returned to his guest chamber, tired but calm. He knew many nobles hated him now, for he had insulted their pride without meaning to. But he also knew some had begun to wonder if humans had something worth listening to. That was enough. Far above, in her throne room, Queen Serenia looked out at the twin suns. Her heart was unsettled. She had seen countless ambassadors, countless lords, countless kings, but none had spoken like this human. None had shown such calm honesty. She whispered softly to herself, words no one else could hear. "Strange human. You stand among giants, yet you are not afraid. Why does that make me curious?" And so while the nobles laughed and whispered, a seed of interest began to grow in the heart of the queen. The next morning, the palace bells rang across the empire's capital. Their sound was deep and powerful, echoing through the crystal towers like the heartbeat of the city. Captain Elias Grant stood at his window, watching the twin suns rise once again over Zira. He had faced the council the day before, and though he had spoken honestly, he knew his words alone were not enough. The nobles of the empire respected strength, not speeches. A knock came at his chamber door. The golden-armored guard stepped inside and bowed briefly. "Captain Elias," one of them said in a voice like metal striking stone. "The council has spoken. You have been chosen to face the trial of honor." Elias raised an eyebrow. He had heard whispers of the trial, but did not know what it truly meant. "A trial?" he asked calmly. "What kind of trial?" The guard's mask did not move. "A test. Of courage, of wisdom, of loyalty. All who wish to be trusted by the empire must face it. You will not be forced, but if you refuse, humanity will be judged unworthy." Elias nodded slowly. He understood. This was more than a ceremony, it was a trap set by the nobles who doubted him. They wanted to see him fail and prove that humans were weak, but he also knew it was an opportunity. If he succeeded, he would show humanity's strength not through weapons, but through character. "I accept," Elias said firmly. The trial of honor was held in the Hall of Mirrors, a vast chamber carved from living crystal. The walls shone like glass, reflecting every movement, every face, until it was impossible to tell what was real and what was illusion. At the center stood a circle of glowing symbols. The nobles filled the seats around the chamber, eager to watch the strange human attempt their ancient challenge. Queen Sirenia sat on her throne at the highest seat, her glowing eyes fixed on Elias. Her face remained calm, but inside she felt a strange tension. She had seen many face the trial. Few had passed. None had been human. The master of the trial, an elder noble with silver skin and robes of midnight blue, stepped forward. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Captain Elias Grant of Earth, you will face 3 tasks. The first will test your mind, the second your heart, the third your courage. If you fail any, you will leave in dishonor. Do you accept?" Elias stood tall. "I accept." The elder raised his hand, and the glowing symbols at the center of the floor shifted, forming a path of light. "Step forward, human, and let the trial begin." The first task, the puzzle of paths. The light around Elias shifted, and suddenly the mirrors stretched into endless hallways. He was alone, surrounded by twisting corridors of crystal. Each path looked the same, but only one would lead him out. The voices of the nobles whispered faintly, though he could not see them. Most challengers rushed forward, trying to guess the correct way. Many became lost in the maze until they gave up in despair. But Elias did not rush. He stood still, breathing slowly, studying the reflections. He noticed something. The mirrors showed his image, but one reflection was different. In most he looked straight and strong, but in one his image looked weaker, like a shadow. He followed that reflection, choosing the path that looked wrong instead of right. Step by step, he chose the imperfect reflections, the ones that showed flaws, mistakes, humanity. At last the light opened before him, and he stepped back into the chamber. The nobles gasped. Few had solved the puzzle so quickly. The elder nodded slightly. The human sees what others ignore. He passes the first task. The second task, the choice of compassion. The floor shifted again, and this time Elias found himself standing on a bridge of crystal above a dark abyss. On one side stood a small alien child crying, trapped behind a cage of light. On the other side lay a shining jewel glowing with power. The voice of the elder echoed, "Choose. Save the child or claim the jewel. One will prove strength, the other will prove weakness." The nobles leaned forward eagerly. Most challengers chose the jewel, proving their desire for power. Few dared choose the child, for they thought it would mark them as weak. Elias did not hesitate. He walked straight toward the child. He reached into the cage of light, even as it burned against his skin. He lifted the small figure gently and carried it to safety. The cage vanished, and the child turned into a light that dissolved into the air. The jewel faded into nothing. The chamber fell silent. The elder spoke again, his voice lower now. "You have chosen what others fear to choose. You passed the second task." Queen Sirenia felt her heart stir. She had seen warriors chase power, kings chase glory, but she had never seen someone choose compassion so quickly without thought of gain. Her glowing eyes softened as she looked at Elias, though she hid her expression behind her calm face. The third task, the trial of courage. The chamber shifted one last time. Flames rose around Elias, and from the fire stepped a giant beast made of stone and molten light. Its eyes burned like suns, and its roar shook the hall. The nobles cheered loudly. This was the task that broke most challengers. The beast was not meant to be defeated. It was meant to test how long one could stand against fear. Elias did not draw a weapon, for he had none. He stood tall, watching the beast approach. His heart pounded, but he did not run. He knew this was not about strength, but about courage. The beast roared and charged. Elias planted his feet firmly. The fire washed over him, but he did not move. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I am human. I will not bow to fear." Suddenly the beast stopped. Its burning eyes flickered, and then it lowered its head. The flames faded, and the monster dissolved into light. The chamber was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in shouts. Some nobles cried in anger, refusing to believe what they had seen. Others clapped their hands against the crystal seats in respect. The elder raised his hand for silence. The human has passed all 3 tasks. He has proven wisdom, compassion, and courage. By the law of the Empire, he is worthy of honor. Elias bowed respectfully, breathing hard but steady. He looked up at Queen Serenia. Their eyes met, and though she said nothing, he saw something new in her gaze. Admiration and perhaps something even deeper. The nobles around her whispered fiercely. Some were furious. They had hoped to see him fail. Others were shaken, unsure what to think of a human who had passed the ancient trial. A few, however, looked at him with newfound respect. Queen Serenia rose slowly from her throne. Her silver-white robe shimmered in the light as she spoke. Captain Elias Grant of Earth has faced the trial of honor. He has succeeded where many have failed. Let it be known that humanity has taken its first step into our circle. The chamber echoed with her voice. The Empire would not forget this day. Elias returned to his chamber later, exhausted but proud. He knew this was only the beginning. The nobles would not accept him so easily. Enemies would rise, but he had shown them what it meant to be human. And far above, in her private chamber, Queen Serenia whispered to herself again, her hand resting over her heart. This human, he is not like the others. Why do I feel as if he carries something I have long searched for? Her glowing eyes lingered on the thought, as the palace outside buzzed with shock and wonder. The Palace of Zero was never silent, even in the glowing halls after the trial of honor. Whispers and quiet conversations swirled like shadows. Captain Elias Grant had proven himself, yet that victory stirred more than admiration. It stirred envy, fear and anger among the nobles. From the high towers, Queen Serenia watched the city glow beneath the twin suns. The trial of honor had been unprecedented. A human had passed, something almost unimaginable, and yet she could feel the tension rising in her palace. Many nobles would not forget this, nor forgive what they saw as an insult to their pride. Elias had returned to his quarters, exhausted but alert. He spent hours reviewing the protocols of the palace, the traditions of the Zyran court, and the movements of the nobles. He had learned quickly that to survive here, he needed more than courage. He needed awareness. Every glance, every whispered word could hold danger. That evening, the palace was preparing for the grand feast, a celebration that would honor Elias and officially recognize humanity's first contact with the Zyran Empire. Crystal lights floated in the air like tiny suns, casting golden rays on the elaborate tables filled with food, drink, and delicate decorations. Nobles in robes of every color filled the halls, laughing and speaking in tones that ranged from polite to sharp. Elias entered the hall, flanked by 2 guards. His uniform was simple but neat, contrasting with the extravagant clothing of the alien nobles. He could feel eyes on him, curious, admiring, and hostile. He smiled politely at those who looked, keeping his composure. He had learned that confidence was a shield almost as strong as any armor. The feast began with music that seemed alive, crystal instruments floating above the tables, playing melodies that resonated with the soul. Elias observed the nobles carefully. Some approached him, offering words of respect, while others whispered behind his back. Among them, Lord Valen's sharp gaze burned into him, full of resentment. Elias remained calm, knowing that any sign of fear would only embolden his enemies. As the feast continued, subtle movements in the crowd caught Elias's attention. 2 figures lingered near the back, their robes dark and their faces hidden by masks of polished silver. Their gestures were small but deliberate, almost mechanical. His senses, sharpened by years of training, recognized the pattern. Something was wrong. Elias excused himself from the main table under the pretense of observing the palace halls. As he moved through the corridors, he felt the hum of the palace beneath his feet, the living crystal walls responding to the tension in the air. Then from the shadows, the 2 masked figures appeared. Before Elias could react, they lunged. Swift and precise, they aimed to strike. But Elias was ready. He sidestepped, using their momentum against them, and pushed them into the shimmering walls. The guards, alerted by the noise, arrived immediately, capturing the assailants. The chamber fell silent as Queen Serenia entered, her glowing eyes wide. "Elias," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "Are you unharmed?" "I am," he replied firmly. "But these were no ordinary thieves. Someone intended to harm you, or perhaps to test me." The queen's gaze hardened. "It is worse than you imagine. Many in this palace do not want humanity to rise. They fear your presence, your courage, your honesty." Elias nodded slowly. He understood. The trial of honor had marked him as a threat to those who relied on power and fear, rather than truth and loyalty. Yet he did not feel fear, only determination. We must be careful, the queen continued. These nobles will try again, perhaps sooner than we expect. Tonight the feast will continue, but you must remain vigilant. The rest of the evening passed with careful observation. The nobles tried to mask their intentions behind smiles and polite conversation, but Elias could sense their schemes. He spoke gently to those who were genuinely curious, answered questions patiently, and avoided any conflict that might give them a reason to act against him. Meanwhile, Queen Serenia observed from her throne. Something stirred within her, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and perhaps a personal fascination. She had never seen a human act with such calm bravery. She had ruled for centuries, and yet this stranger from a young, untested world had already begun to change the air around her palace. As the feast neared its end, the palace lights dimmed slightly, signaling the transition to the ceremonial toast. The nobles raised their glasses, and Queen Serenia's voice rang through the hall. "To the first human in the court of Zira," she said, "may he honor our traditions and prove his loyalty not only to our empire, but to the values we hold most dear." Elias bowed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment. This was recognition, yes, but it was also a challenge. He had gained honor, but enemies had also multiplied. After the toast, as the nobles departed for their chambers, a quiet voice reached Elias's ears. "Captain Grant, follow me," whispered a young noble, one who had watched the trial with interest rather than envy. Elias followed into a small, hidden chamber, where the young noble lowered his hood. "I am Lior," he said softly. "Not all of us wish harm upon you. Some of us respect your courage, but the truth is Lord Valen and others will stop at nothing to undermine you. You must be ready for anything." "I understand," Elias replied. "Thank you for your honesty. It will not be forgotten." Lior nodded and vanished into the shadows, leaving Elias alone. He took a deep breath, thinking of the palace and the dangers hidden within its beauty. He realized that courage alone would not be enough. He would need strategy, observation, and trust in those who were true allies. The night was far from over. As Elias returned to his quarters, the palace lights glimmered like stars in motion. Outside, the city of Zira pulsed with life. Somewhere in the halls, plots were being whispered. Alliances formed in secret, and danger prepared to strike again. Elias allowed himself a small smile. He was ready. Humanity had already begun its journey among the stars, and he would not let fear or envy stop them. But even he did not yet understand the full scope of what awaited. The next days would test not only his bravery but his loyalty, his wisdom, and the trust of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, Queen Serenia herself. And far above the palace, in the private chambers of the queen, she watched the city below, her thoughts tangled. Elias had passed the trial of honor. He had shown bravery, wisdom, and compassion. Yet more than that, he had stirred something in her, a feeling she had not known for centuries. "This human," she whispered softly, touching the crystal pendant at her chest. "He is unlike anyone I have met. Can it be that he will change everything?" The palace seemed to hum in agreement, as if the living crystal walls themselves acknowledged the truth. Danger, intrigue, and challenge awaited, but so did courage, loyalty, and the promise of something extraordinary. Elias lay in his chamber that night, staring at the twin suns beyond the windows. He felt the tension, the uncertainty, but also the spark of possibility. The Ziran Empire was ancient, powerful, and proud, but humanity had a place here now. And he would prove that humans were not defined by size, age, or strength, but by courage, wisdom, and the choices they made. As sleep took him, the palace outside whispered secrets. Shadows moved. Plans were made. And somewhere in the darkness, eyes watched Elias with both fear and curiosity. The next challenge would come, and it would be more dangerous than any trial. But for now, the human had survived, and in doing so had already begun to change the fate of the Ziran Empire forever. The palace of Zira was alive with movement and whispers. After the recent attempt on Captain Elias Grant's life, the nobles had become cautious, yet their pride would not allow them to show it. Many still doubted the human, believing he had somehow survived by luck rather than skill. Others, however, were slowly beginning to wonder if this young species from a small, untested planet possessed qualities the Empire had long forgotten. Honesty, loyalty, and courage that did not rely on power. Queen Serenia, seated in her throne room, watched the preparations for the next council meeting. The High Council had been called together once more, but this time the stakes were higher than ever. They would demand that she choose a consort, an ally in both governance and legacy. Many nobles expected her to select a powerful lord, someone with experience, wealth, and influence. None expected her eyes to linger on a human who had arrived less than a week ago. Elias entered the chamber, escorted by 2 guards who had become quietly loyal to him after witnessing his bravery and intelligence. He felt the weight of 100 gazes on him, curious, suspicious, judgmental. He did not flinch. He had faced trials, he had faced enemies, and now he would face the full judgment of an empire. The council began as usual, with nobles presenting arguments showing wealth, histories of conquest, and accomplishments meant to impress the queen. Each voice seemed louder than the last, full of pride and expectation. "Your Majesty," Lord Valen began, his sharp voice cutting through the murmurs. "A ruler cannot afford weakness. A consort must bring power, influence, and the ability to enforce order across this empire. A human, though remarkable, cannot provide these." Some nobles nodded while others whispered quietly. Many had grown tired of Elias's presence, but none could deny the results of the trial of honor. He had passed where many others had failed, and the queen had noticed it all. Queen Serenya's gaze, calm and focused, swept across the council. "Power is not always measured in armies or wealth," she said softly, though her words echoed through the chamber. "Strength comes in many forms, and it is not always visible at first glance." The chamber fell quiet. The nobles leaned forward, curious and skeptical. Few could remember a queen speaking in such a way. Few could remember a human being defended so openly in front of the entire council. Elias felt the eyes of the nobles, their scrutiny almost unbearable. But he also felt the queen's eyes on him, soft, glowing, and filled with an emotion he could not yet name. He bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I do not seek power, only trust. I am here to honor your empire and prove that humanity can stand with you, not above or below." There was a pause, a moment of stillness so deep that even the floating crystal lights seemed to hold their breath. Then the queen rose slowly from her throne. The room hushed completely. "Enough," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I have seen this human. I have observed him in trials, in danger, and in moments where courage and wisdom were tested. He has not only survived, but has proven qualities that many here have long forgotten." The nobles whispered furiously. Some were angry. Some were shocked. None had expected this. Queen Serenia lifted her hand and the room fell silent once more. "I will speak plainly," she continued, her glowing eyes locking onto Elias. "Captain Elias Grant of Earth, I wish you were my husband." The words hung in the air like a living flame. Shock rippled across the chamber. Nobles froze in disbelief. Murmurs rose into chaos as some shouted in anger, some in disbelief, and others simply stared, stunned by the unexpected confession. Elias felt his heart stop for a moment. The words were not a joke nor a test. The queen's eyes were sincere, her posture calm, yet her voice carried the weight of centuries. He had been trained for diplomacy, for crisis, for danger, but never for something like this. "Your Majesty," he began, unsure of what to say. Words felt small, insufficient for the gravity of her declaration. He bowed again, carefully, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotion inside him. "I am honored beyond words. I never imagined such trust or such regard." The chamber's murmurs grew louder. Some nobles hissed, arguing among themselves. "This is madness," one cried. "A human? How dare she even consider it?" Another whispered, "Perhaps the queen is bewitched or deceived. No human could match the traditions of Zira." But Queen Serenia ignored them. Her eyes remained on Elias. "This is not a whim," she said softly, her voice carrying over the council's anger. "It is a truth I have observed and felt. You have shown courage, wisdom, and loyalty, qualities I value above all else. A consort must have more than power. They must have heart. You have earned my respect and something deeper." Elias's chest tightened. He could not fully express the mix of gratitude, surprise, and humility he felt. He had come to Zira as a representative of humanity, hoping to earn trust. He had not expected to touch the heart of a queen centuries old, wise, and admired by all. Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I will serve with honor. I cannot claim to match your experience or your centuries of wisdom, but I can promise loyalty, honesty, and respect in every way I am able. Queen Serenia nodded. That is enough. She turned briefly to the council, her voice rising with authority. Let it be known that the decision is mine and mine alone. This human shall stand in my trust and companionship. The Empire may question, but the judgment of the Queen is final. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Some nobles turned red with anger, others whispered in disbelief, and a few quietly looked on with admiration. No one had expected such courage from the Queen herself, to declare her feelings and trust openly, regardless of centuries of tradition. Lord Valan rose abruptly, his face sharp with rage. Your Majesty, this is scandalous. How can this be allowed? It goes against tradition, against the laws of this empire. Queen Serenia's glowing eyes turned to him, calm yet filled with an unshakable authority. Tradition alone is not wisdom, Lord Valan. Blind adherence to custom is not strength. I have judged this human by his actions, his choices, and his heart. That is all the law I need. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the most vocal critics could not argue with the clarity in her voice. The Queen had spoken truthfully with conviction, and that truth could not be ignored. Elias, though overwhelmed, felt a quiet warmth inside. He had always believed in humanity's ability to stand for what was right, to act with courage even in the face of fear or doubt. Now that belief had been mirrored back to him, not just as respect but as trust and admiration from someone who had ruled for centuries. After the council meeting ended, the palace slowly emptied. Nobles returned to their chambers, talking in low tones, some angry, some incredulous, others quietly thoughtful. Many would plot, many would scheme, but for the first time, the human had not only survived the Empire's judgment, he had earned a place in its heart. In the quiet of the evening, Queen Serenia invited Elias to walk with her along the palace gardens. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky glowing with shades of violet and gold. Crystal flowers glimmered faintly, and streams of living water flowed along paths lined with luminous stones. You have changed the air in this palace, Captain, she said softly. I have seen many in my life, yet few have touched me as you have, not with words of power, but with actions and with honesty. Elias bowed slightly, humbled. Your Majesty, I only acted as any human would, guided by what we believe is right. I could not have imagined, he paused, searching for words, that it would mean so much. She smiled faintly, the glow of her eyes softening. It is not just what you did, but how you did it. The nobles may question, and perhaps they always will, but the heart sees truth even when tradition cannot. They walked together in silence, the palace around them alive with quiet energy. For a human who had journeyed across the stars, who had faced trials and danger, this moment was unlike any other. Yet it was real, and it carried the weight of possibility. Somewhere deep in the palace, the whispers of the past mixed with the hopes of the future. A human had not only entered the Zyran Empire, he had begun to change it. And the Queen's confession, bold and unexpected, had shaken the foundations of tradition and pride, proving that courage, honesty, and loyalty could bridge worlds. As the twin moons rose over Zira, Elias realized that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, doubts, and perhaps dangers that none of them could yet foresee. But for the first time he felt certain of one thing. Humanity had a place in the stars, and his bond with Queen Serenia would be at the center of a new era.